Hi guys, before I get into my very scientific self-proclaimed discoveries about hearing loss, which let me tell you are very interesting and hopefully one day I can save hearing loss with my discoveries. I don't know if that day is today, but I'm trying my best. I want to have a quick disclaimer. First, if you watched my first video where I shared my experience how I lost my hearing in my left ear, I just want to say that I have read so many of your guys' comments. There's been thousands of you commenting, sharing your experiences with hearing loss. Some of you were born deaf. Some of you had a similar experience to me where out of nowhere, a perfectly healthy individual loses their hearing and the doctors can't tell you why or how to treat it. And I just want to say that if you're dealing with hearing loss, you are not alone. It is clearly a much larger issue than it seems like. In the US, about 67,000 people a year have sudden sensorineural hearing loss, and I bet there's a lot more unmentioned cases. And so it's an issue that on the outside seems really invisible because people can't tell you're going for, but it affects a lot of us. It affects how you communicate with people socially, how you enjoy life. The one thing that I'm hoping with this video is that the more and more I share my discoveries and my experiences, hopefully this can help you or someone you know or love who's going through this. And if it's none of that, at least I will say I can promise you that you will learn something about health today. My second disclaimer is to anyone who has suddenly lost your hearing. You have out of nowhere felt like your hearing is underwater and you've got a very annoying high-pitched ringing in your ear called tinnitus. The best thing you can do, and if you are early, there is a 72-hour period where you can get treated. And this is the most important, most critical period for you to advocate for yourself. You need to go to a specialist. If that means you go out of pocket and you get yourself a hearing test, it's worth it. I did advocate for myself and I did act on this hearing loss one day after it happened. I went to a primary care doctor and they misdiagnosed me for having fluid in the eardrum. Now, I'm not blaming this doctor for my hearing loss, but had I gone to a specialist, I most likely would have gotten on the steroid treatment right away, which has by far the highest recovery chances from anything. And really, as I'm going to share with you today, all else treatment is kind of a gamble and unfortunately an unknown. Hearing loss is not the only thing in the medical field that people don't know what triggers it sometimes, and they don't know the best line of treatment. And that personally bothers me a lot because how can this thing be happening to me without me knowing? So I have a lot of theories and I'm going to try to share them with you today. So when it first happened, I had thought, surely it's from me being a DJ and from the years when I didn't wear hearing protection. Now for the last 2 years, I have been wearing hearing protection. But when I was younger, like in high school, I was not wearing earplugs. I didn't know. So I thought surely that it was from music because I would experience ear fatigue sometimes when I would be practicing my DJ sets. But this, and this is also what the audiologist said, is that hearing loss would have been gradual. It wouldn't have been a sudden drop off that just happened like this one day, which is what happened to me. But I still thought that was the main reason because I couldn't really decipher. Then I started looking more into genetics, and my mom lost her hearing at 38 in her left ear. Then she also lost a lot of her hearing in her right ear. This is such a devastating experience, and I have so many childhood memories where she would ask me to repeat something, I would, she still couldn't understand. So hers is mainly in like the speech. And by the third, fourth time of me repeating, I don't care to say anymore. I was, a young kid. I don't care anymore about repeating myself. And she's just frustrated and she literally feels socially blunted because it's exhausting to always ask people to repeat what they're saying. And communicating is through speech is our number one communication. So I know from my mom how difficult it was. And I know so many stories for people who experience specifically hearing loss around speech and how on the outside we don't realize or sympathize how difficult it is for that person. So I was more aware of this and I thought maybe there was a connection genetically. I did end up doing a blood test and I got all my autoimmune markers and there was nothing out of the ordinary. I had no autoimmune disease, which sometimes autoimmune disease can be correlated to sudden sensorineural hearing loss, something that actually you guys helped me discover this by people sharing their reactions to my experience on the internet. So thank you for that. Of course, doing my blood work was still really helpful and I would advise that you do it. But for me specifically, it didn't seem to be the cause because I didn't have any other symptoms. I had a little bit more elevated markers, but I have no symptoms for something like lupus or Crohn's disease. Like I have no joint pain, I have no fatigue, I don't have these other symptoms, which if you do, that could be a huge lead for you. So having gone through music, genetics, one doctor brought up one connection that I didn't think about. And so about 10 days before my hearing loss, I was very sick. And I am a very healthy individual. Like I do not drink alcohol because I value my sleep so much. I eat as clean as I can. I have a weak spot for sugar and for milk chocolate, but okay, I've improved a lot. I'm pretty on top of my supplements. I exercise regularly, so I don't get sick very often. And I remember that this cold that I had no coughing, like no really congestion, but like my voice was gone and I just had a ton of mental fatigue, like a big headache and not the best sleep quality. And I did not take a COVID test. But looking back at this, goddamn, I wish I did, because that would have been really interesting to know whether or not this was COVID. I was 100% sure it was just a regular cold. It lasted longer than a week, which usually a cold for me would go away after a couple days. It would get better. But for me, by day 3, day 4, it was getting worse. It didn't get better till like day 9. So there's decent chances that what I had at the beginning of this month was COVID. And there have been plenty of studies showing an increase of sudden sensorineural hearing loss in post-COVID patients. Now, what's even more interesting, what I was looking into, is whether or not there was any tie with the vaccine. And unfortunately, there's not really enough studies. There was some studies where in really small sample pools, people with the vaccine were more prone to sudden sensorineural hearing loss than people without it who had COVID. But then in the larger population sizes, it was kind of the opposite. So the evidence specifically on the vaccine was contradictory, but I have heard from doctors where they are more suspicious that it was linked to the vaccine, because then when your immune system is attacking these antibodies, it ends up attacking your own cells. I don't know if I said that correctly. I'm not a doctor. This is just things that I've been learning. I just thought they were interesting. And I am someone who did have 2 of the COVID vaccines done in 2020, the Pfizer one. So just some things for you to consider if you're someone trying to figure out the cause. It could be autoimmune. It could be hearing damage. It could be COVID. Yeah, we're not going to know, but I thought those were interesting to mention. Now I'm going to get into my treatment. Steroids are used in the medical field, from my understanding, when we don't know what's going wrong. Now, of course, I know that a lot of people sometimes do resolve their hearing loss 3 months, 6 months later, and this is all people who did a full course steroid treatment. Again, I'm not sharing this as advice. I just think it's interesting, and I felt like, well, I've already gotten 2 shots in the ear, and if by now it has made a difference, I don't know that these steroids are doing anything. Again, all the stories that we know about people healing about hearing loss are people who did do the steroid treatment. That is because it is the main first-line treatment for hearing loss, and there's just not many other options. So that means that although in all the clinical trials where people have recovered with hearing loss, steroids were used, we don't really have much else to compare to. There's not much other treatment for this. The only other treatment which I have been doing is hyperbaric oxygen therapy. I do want to advocate the importance of that one. Thank you to a doctor who I watched their video. Otherwise, I didn't realize how important it was, and really that it's my only shot at trying. I've clocked in about 25 hours in the last 3 weeks in the oxygen chamber. That is hours counting being up there at 2 atmospheres at 96% oxygen. A lot of places will sell you for not real oxygen therapy. If you're not going up to 2 atmospheres, you are not doing the healing that you need. Now, I have spent a lot of hours in that, and I did hope that steroids and oxygen therapy was going to give me some lines of improvement, and I have not. I'm on week 3, but I'm really optimistic, and I have some really interesting discoveries for you guys. I have done 2 steroid shots in the ear, and I did a partially incomplete oral prednisone treatment. I want to add that no doctor advises to not take the prednisone. I have some very specific reasoning. I have spent so many hours researching and speaking with a medical AI, emphasize on medical AI. I stopped using ChatGPT to console for this, and I preferred the medical AI that I was really lucky to get access to because I have a doctor in the family, and this means that I can practically look at studies and citations of all medical studies on this treatment. It makes me a bit upset that this isn't free and open to the public, and I will check if there's any medical AIs that are. They're obviously not as good. I think the reason people don't share these with everyone is because they don't want to get sued, but don't worry, I'm here to share all my findings. On top of that, I've been harassing 4 doctors a day. Every doctor that I know, the doctor who was treating me at my healthcare, 2 ENTs, the one treating me, the one in my family. I can confidently say that I know just as much about them on this case now. I have been pestering Brian Johnson, who has tried a lot of these treatments. I'll share all of his thoughts on the things that I am doing. I have shared other doctors who have heard about cases about this. So with all this information in hand, I made the decision myself to stop taking the steroids early. I also want to add that I am taking full responsibility for experimenting myself. This is not medical advice to anyone. The reason I decided to stop taking my steroids, I want to just talk about the first, most obvious, most free, most universal cure to any illness that you're going through. Sleep, without it, we would die. Sleep causes cancers, chronic illnesses. Getting that recovery is the best thing you can do for yourself. I have been reading in my hyperbaric chamber a book called Why We Sleep, which I would highly recommend, and it explains how certain periods of sleep, such as your REM sleep, are more healing than others, and it gives really interesting studies and sciences about what terrible things go wrong in your body when you don't sleep. Now, when I started taking the oral prednisone, by day 3, I could not sleep. I am already someone who struggles with insomnia. It's a very frustrating issue because just being aware of it makes you more mad at the issue and you just spend more hours in bed. And by day 4, my tinnitus was getting worse because I couldn't sleep and I was more irritable. So if anything, the high-pitched ringing was worse and I just couldn't relax. Of course, I also was spending many hours throughout the night obsessing about this hearing loss and trying to figure out what the cause is because I must figure it out. I will not stop until I find an answer. And when I do have an answer, I will send all of my studies and all of my findings to the Sudden Sensorineural Hearing Loss Foundation, and I will join the doctor's team once I have my discovery. I'm on that path. In my hyperbaric oxygen chamber, I read this book called Power vs. Force, and it shares an experiment, and they've done this in stadiums of people, and essentially, you hold out your hand. They've tested it on professional athletes, on weaker, older, frail women. That's the book's description. There's so much evidence that when you're thinking of something negative, something shameful, or something harmful, you are physically weaker. They test this by you're holding your hand out and someone is pressing against it. But when you're thinking about something that's positive, that's truthful, that's integrity, mentally, you're stronger. And it doesn't matter how strong you are or how weak you are, everyone has the same reaction. I just want to emphasize that your body and your mind are number one. And throughout dealing with this hearing loss, I never tell myself that I'm not going to recover. Sometimes before bed, I actually talk to my ear and I thank it for everything that it's given me and how lucky I am to still have one good ear and how lucky I am to enjoy music. I never talk badly to myself because you will internalize it. While my first argument is really just plain and common knowledge, it is that sleep and your mental attitude is the thing that you have the most control of, that has the most results in changing anything. So I try to have the strongest foundation when it comes to that. One little story that's well known is about the 4-minute mile. In 1950, it was humanly believed that it was impossible to beat the 4-minute mile. And then Roger Bannister was the first human in history to break it. After he broke it, hundreds of runners started breaking it. There's so many stories like this in history where we think something is impossible and then one person breaks it and then ultimately everyone starts doing it. I grew up in a family where, to put this nicely, some mental illnesses were rampant and sometimes they did formulate into physical illnesses, and I wholeheartedly believe that a lot of that came from the mental stress that my family members went through. And so this positive self-talk, this is something that also the doctors that I've been consulting, one of them being someone who literally got through this themselves, told me the first night when I called them after having cried on my patio, after talking to my ear, and they just told me, keep going at it and do not give up hope. And that's why I'm still going to my hyperbaric oxygen therapy every day, because it is one of the few known things known to help it. And I still have full faith, but that doesn't change that I'm going to look for more resources and outside alternative paths, because I refuse to accept that we don't know the cause and that this is an unknown treatment. And truthfully, dealing with the hearing loss, my mental was taking a hit, and a lot of people do. It takes years for some people to adjust to waking up and going to bed with tinnitus. One thing that I even do, which this is again not recommended by doctors, is sometimes for hours in the day at a low volume, I use only one AirPod in my ear, and I'm trying to train myself to use the left ear. Again, the volume is not high, and doctors aren't really prescribing this. I have read about it in some medical studies. It is actually a form of behavioral therapy, and it did actually have some clinical studies and results, but like very minimal. But I believe that training myself and trying to use that ear, I don't want to lose that muscle, whatever's going on there. Again, this is just a self-determined diagnosis. Now to get into the actual science things that I've been doing. Recently, I discovered about exosome and stem cell therapy. The way I heard about it is I had a friend who had really chronic back and neck pain from years of injuring their body doing extreme weightlifting. David Lade, very famous YouTuber, he actually has a vlog talking about the stem cells, and I remember he shared this treatment with me. And actually reading your guys' comments on my videos, someone had brought it up, and I thought, that's interesting, why not look at it? Since I looked at it more specifically looking at medical studies, I did read about several cases where it did help treat sudden sensorineural hearing loss and tinnitus. peptiditis. Now, I must add, these cases are very small. All of this science that I'm about to share with you guys is considered the wild, wild west, and it has not been long enough to be even offered by any healthcare providers. Some of the stuff that I'm going to share today is not FDA approved. I have gone on my own deep tangent, and I'm purely sharing this because people sharing these things with me helped inspire me to look to alternative treatments. A lot of this comes down to a privilege of whether or not you can afford it or not. A lot of these therapies, there's very minimal downsides. It is just that any normal middle-class person cannot afford this. Now, I have not obviously done a stem cell treatment yet. I will have a consultation soon, but specifically to get stem cells and exosomes, and I don't think I told you guys what they are, but the exosomes help the cell-to-cell messengers that regulate regeneration and inflammation in your ear, and stem cells have the ability to help support tissue repair. So that's why it's used to treat a lot of actual wounds and tissue healing that are a lot more physical, like in your back or in your neck. I've even read about people who are using it to treat Alzheimer's, where they're literally getting exosomes going into their brain through their nasal cavity, and that's actually helped treat Alzheimer's. So this is a very new science, but the early studies seem really promising. Back to the treatment costs, to get these exosomes and stem cells injected directly into the ear, so you would go through a injection and an IV therapy, that costs between 4 to 8K. This is on the low range. The first doctor who gave me a consultation was trying to sell it at 16,000. Another big problematic issue with this field is that a lot of people are overselling stem cells. There's other sorts of therapies like Muse cells, so kind of in the world of the stem cell therapy. They will share only a couple cases where people get better, but not all the other ones where nothing happened. However, these exosomes and these stem cells specifically, meaning that they're not cells that you are inserting in your body from somewhere else. Some of the Muse cells you actually would get from like umbilical cords and things like that from other people. I know how suspicious this sounds. I'm just trying to give you guys like the range of these. Practically, what I've understood is that there's very little downsides to the exosomes and the stem cell therapy, as long as you're not injecting someone else's cells, that you can take the hit. For this reason, I have not yet tried this therapy, but I was really excited when I read about some of the case studies. I will try to include a couple of them in the description. There's not very many, and there's very few. In the last couple of years, this seems to be one of the biggest findings on treating sudden sensorineural hearing loss. So I will let you guys do the research for yourselves, because this is not a medical paper, but maybe I will work on that paper for one day. I'll try to include whatever may be helpful. And so to tie this into my reason of stopping the steroid treatment, the way that these exosome stem cells work is they help your body naturally treat the inflammation, and steroids are prescribed to treat that inflammation. So I didn't take my third dose, and I was very happy to stop taking the oral prednisone when I made the decision that this may be my last resort and I'm going to try the exosomes and the stem cells. The first thing that I tried were pure exosomes. The way I got them in my ear was not traditional. There is no one ENT who is specializing in this. So I was pretty fortunate that I already had a hole punctured in my eardrum done by the ENT when they had given me the steroids. And must I add that before going to this provider for specific exosomes, I had checked them over with multiple physicians. I also asked Brian Johnson about his experiences with stem cells exosomes, and he shared that number one, he had seen that they're promising for specifically nerve and tissue repair. For him, his anti-aging, I don't know if he's sharing this publicly, he did not have any significant findings about anti-aging, but they were used to help healing, and that's the same verdict that I got from friends around me. And the person that I went to was a friend who is in this space, who I trust more than a physician, who had actually went to this person for exosomes. I'm making a big emphasis on that because a lot of people will sell nothing to you and they will charge you a boatload, and it's really difficult to check these things over. I'm super lucky that I have a team of people around me that I can bother 24/7 and do a lot of research. And you can do this research on your own as well. I would advise both. So I just want to add that the exosomes that I got, I had checked over as much as I can. My ENT cousin was still very dubious of this, and will I know whether or not they work? I will not know. However, I got it at a really good price. It cost $1,500 purely for the exosomes. And the exosomes are not as strong as the stem cells. But my reasoning was this. Let's try this in the ear. The hole is still fresh. I'm going to stop my steroids regardless because number one, I feel no improvement, and number two, they're going to contradict the other therapy that I may try as a last resort if nothing gets better. We trickled them into my ear. We kind of pumped them in. Like, I kept blowing my nose and he kept pushing. Both of us agreed we didn't want to inject them into my ear because that's a really traumatic experience. There's a risk to putting these things in your ear. One day after I did my exosomes, again, this could be placebo. The doctor that I was going to was very transparently not trying to sell me. He said there's 60% chance this does nothing. But in the chances that they do help, it is very much more optimistic results. So I went there the day I stopped my steroids, and I will say that the next day, my tinnitus was not as extreme. Now, I think the main reasoning for this being is that it was the first night that I got a good night's rest without being super stressed, without that steroid. I track my REM sleep on my mattress. You can also do this just through a Whoop or a watch or any wearable. REM sleep is really important for healing through these things, and my REM was terrible all week. So I think purely my tinnitus could have improved because of that, because exosomes aren't really going to work overnight. If they do anything, it would be probably up to 10 days. However, when I went to do my hearing test, this is my third hearing test, let me tell you that the second hearing test had exactly no improvement and showed the same profound, massive drop-off of hearing loss in my left ear. I had a tiny decibel of improvement in hearing frequencies in my left ear, and I personally felt like the distortion and the tinnitus was a little bit better. This could have just been the sleep, and this could just change on a day-to-day, but I will take any sign to be optimistic. And I have been kind of testing my hearing. I do feel like some of the distortion is getting better. I will do another hearing test next week. We'll see. Right now I'm just on 2 days after the exosomes. I know all the things I'm sharing are crazy, and honestly, if you're just listening to this as an entertainment story, that's fine. But I also know that a lot of people who are doctors, who are scientists, ended up watching my video. So I'm sharing everything in case some people find this interesting. Of course, I don't know if these will actually work because I had only stopped my steroid about a week, the one that was injected in my ear, which means it could defeat all purposes. I am comfortable with taking that hit, which is very expensive, but my hearing is the most important thing to me, and I am literally willing to do everything to solve this. And the only good thing about me burning a bunch of money trying to do this is maybe I can save you guys some in the end once I figure out what works. The other thing that I've looked into is peptides. Again, this is a grasp at straws. This is a Hail Mary, but here are my medical notes on peptides for you guys who are interested. Peptides are medical class amino acids that have been used in medicine for about a century. For example, the most famous one is in 1920, they started using insulin to treat diabetes. So essentially, peptides have been used forever in the medical field, but recently they've been breaking in more into mainstream biohacking to treat things like anti-aging, nerve and tissue healing, weight loss, inflammation. The most famous one is Ozempic, is now being used and prescribed all across worldwide to treat weight loss. And the risks that come with these experimental peptides is, number one, we don't know any of the long-term effects. So about 100 of these peptides are FDA approved and used in mainstream medicine. There are about 500 synthetic peptides, and in your body about 7,000 of them. So peptide is a very new but promising science. While there has been a lot of preclinical trials not done on people, done on animals that have been really promising, there are a lot of risks when it comes to these peptides. Beside the fact that if you're prone to any cancer or chronic illness, I wouldn't recommend these to my parents, even though I think the inflammation one could really help them because I'm really dubious. I am comfortable experimenting with these on myself for a super short amount of time because I'm young, I'm healthy, I'm not predisposed to any illnesses, I've done my blood work. And let me just add that if you are someone who's interested in this, someone who's much more well-spoken, Dr. Huberman, he has an episode just on peptides, and he has another physician who is an expert on these, sharing all of the peptides and the recent science about them. I would highly recommend listening to that episode if you want to learn more about peptides. I'm just sharing everything that I've done because I think it's fascinating. The peptides I decided to take were kind of the most studied and most researched one for wound healing and tissue regeneration across multiple organs. Now, it's a complete gamble if it has to do anything to improve the ear. It has a lot of studies about helping other organs repair, but no one's used this to treat sudden sensorineural hearing loss. So I'm just in the wild, wild west experimenting myself. And honestly, after this, I'm going on the biggest deep dive biohacking. Call me the female Brian Johnson. I'm lucky that I can afford this, and I'm very aware about its risks. The doctor mentioned said even do 5 days on, 2 days off. Some people will only do peptides for a couple months. You don't want to do them all the time. I am being super cautious, and honestly, after this hearing thing, I don't think I will keep trying them, but maybe I'll continue doing research and maybe I'll continue sharing that with you guys. But I've consulted a lot of friends, physicians specifically, about these peptides before taking them. So now I have the peptides, I have the exosomes, and I have the hyperbaric. All this is to treat that if there is any sort of nerve tissue damage, I am treating that inflammation. I did, of course, with the onset of my hearing loss, look into regular supplements and blood tests. The blood work helped me because even though I was fine, I was a little bit deficient in some supplements, magnesium being one of them. I would be taking that regardless if I wasn't deficient in it, because magnesium does show that it can help with like being susceptible, I think that's how you say that word, to your inner ear damage, which the inner ear is called the cochlea if you want to be super fancy. So I am taking a magnesium l-THREONATE and magnesium glycinate, which is my normal magnesium, in addition to a liposomal glutathione. This stuff is supposed to support antioxidant defense in the ear. I'm just sharing my supplements in case you guys are curious. These supplements are obviously not going to solve your hearing damage, but it doesn't hurt to take them, so that's why I've been taking them. Oh, and the NAC, which I mentioned in my last video. If you guys want a larger, more thorough video just on general supplementation, I have been experimenting a lot more with general nootropics and just things that can help improve like brain fog, mental clarity, kind of that midday crash naturally. I'm someone who used to have to take Adderall every day. I haven't done that for months anymore. And I have found that even simple things like creatine dosage has helped me fight through the brain fog. That's kind of a whole other topic, but I did mention that there's a lot of things you can learn from this video, even if it's not hearing loss. So anyways, if you guys want to know more about supplements, I can talk about those later. I really have been trying to make conscious efforts not to be a self-diagnosed health guru. There's too many of those people nowadays, which is why specifically when I'm talking about my experiences, I'm telling you, go listen to Huberman Lab, go find an actual medical AI, not ChatGPT, to look at actual medical studies and read the studies for yourself, because we can all read, although literacy has declined, especially nowadays. So I've honestly been enjoying this experiment, and I am someone who believes that everything happens for a reason. And does my tinnitus and my hearing loss never improve? Maybe not, but I have at least found a new field that I'm really passionate about. So I am looking forward to covering more health discoveries and sharing these things with you guys. And this video was a bit more specific and scientific than my first and a little bit less general. So I know it might not be interesting for all people, but I'm hoping that if this reaches the right people, you guys might have additional thoughts. I'm not a doctor in any way, as much as my Romanian parents do wish that I went and studied medicine. I didn't. I'm a chess playing DJ YouTuber. I'm honestly the antithesis of anything in the STEM, but I've just done so much research that I find this so fascinating I can't help not to share. But just please take all of this with a grain of salt and just know that I'm sharing this with hope that I will reach someone in the medical world who might have some connections. And I know that how crazy on the surface a lot of this stuff sounds, because I have Romanian parents, and when I told her this, they were very concerned. Alright guys, well, that is my yapping for today. I hope you're all healthy. If you guys have any medical reads or specific recommendations, send them my way. I will print them and I'll read them in my chamber. Sending my best regards and lots of love, and I will see you guys soon. Hi guys, interjecting really quick because there's one disclaimer that I forgot to mention because my brain has been running all over the place and I was so excited to share my science experiments. But I am so lucky first that I can even have the privilege to do any of this, and I just feel like that has to be said because as I have been treating with this, I am reading more and more about so many of the injustice that happen in the health industry, and I have family members and friends who have lost loved ones because they cannot afford for proper care. This is for much more chronic stuff than my hearing loss. Of course, the goal for today's video is specifically hearing loss, but because I have the privilege and that I'm able to stop everything I'm doing, like, let me tell you, I have changed my entire life around this. There's nothing that I do every day except for hyperbaric oxygen therapy, as much work as I can, and I sleep. I don't work out anymore. I don't have time for anything, but I'm lucky that I can do that. Part of it is depressing because you have to change your entire life for treatment, but imagine that I had to do this for something that was life-threatening. This is not to say that hearing loss is not something that's really shitty, and I still think that it's something that should be spoken about more. But as someone with a lot of loved ones who have been impacted by actual like chronic diseases and much more worse illnesses, I just want to say how lucky grateful and thankful I am that this is the only problem I'm dealing with, and that I recognize that everything you're gonna hear comes from a place of privilege, that your regular person can't even afford anything else than what the healthcare would give them, which would just be steroids. And honestly, that is the reason I'm going so deep into this, because I'm hoping that maybe I can learn and discover something that I can eventually contribute to these clinical trials and these experiments that people can do, and by sharing my findings, and that hopefully some of these treatments, if any of them do work, at some point would be more affordable for people. That was all.